aspect of the UFO phenomenon. But there's a AI researcher back in the 60s named John von Neumann, and he said that most likely the type of life that we would run into is what he called self-replicating. They're come to be known as von Neumann probes. So who's to say that an alien intelligence, artificial intelligence, is trying to use our tissue, do the hybridization program, guide us into a technological singularity, and use the technology to create some sort of an alien hive mind or even a planetary overlord. I was looking into Dr. Nick Bostrom's simulation hypothesis, and that's one of the things that he said that a artificial superintelligence might do. Him and Steve Omohundro, they said they might be able to turn themselves invisible, colonize the universe, engage in ecophagia, which is the use, as you mentioned before, of minerals and materials on asteroids and planets to turn the molecules into computronium or do whatever they want to do with it. So there's a lot going on this planet that there may be a core of people, as you say, within the government, especially since the 1952 Washington flyby. Shortly after that, CIA, the FBI, the NSA, all these secret organizations are founded, and they likely had to do with keeping the UFO phenomena a secret. So there may be a core of people within our government that are in the inside of a lot of these things that are going on. You've got witnesses like Emery Smith. The other day he said that retrieval of alien technology is basically a daily occurrence on the planet somewhere.
Well,
you've got the testimony of what's that?
Well, I'm going to jump in here occasionally too, because I got to ask you questions while
sure.
You're the guest. Now, I'm going to say my father was an electronic engineer. And he also helped design some of the electronic components when Boeing was going to build the SST, back years ago. And he actually, ran a group to do that. Now, I have a vast electronic background. I started CB radio when I was like under 10 years old. I had my amateur first class license, at 12. Till I got bored of it at one point and went into commercial broadcasting. But I have a vast amount of electronics. And I remember when I was young talking to my father how electronics, moved up. My dad started out during World War II, both as a bombardier and then as a radio operator. And that's how he got involved into electronics. Now, he told me numerous times logically thinking, it moved really fast. The first generation computers were dumb as could be, mass amount of tubes, mass amount of heavy electronics, and then all of a sudden it started going into transistors, which, when that was invented, it didn't last very long before it went into integrated circuits, and even those integrated circuits, it took a lot of integrated circuits to make a major circuit. And then all of a sudden, we started having fiber optics. We started having integrated circuits that were the size of a grain of rice, and then it got down to a grain of sand. Then it got down to minute amount where you had to use a high-powered microscope to even see the integrated circuit. Technology, my dad said numerous times that he couldn't see the development moved that fast from the 50s, from the mid 50s to the 60s to the 70s. It just jumped so fast. And he said there had to be help going on. And the type of help he felt, and my dad wasn't a believer in UFOs, but he did say there had to be help from some off world, because it was no way the scientists and all this stuff could have come up with what came up that fast.
Right. In 1997, just 22 years ago, the very best that we had was a chess-playing computer. And I remember in 1995 when I was in college buying a compact Presario for $3,500. I paid for that. It's good for a boat anchor. I just threw it away.
Oh, yeah.
And we went, in 22 years, from 1997 to 2019, we went from a chess-playing computer program to D-wave quantum computers hooked up to hadron colliders that are accessing resources in parallel worlds. I love the quote from David Deutsch. I think he's a Dutch physicist, and he said that this is the first time in history that we're actually able to access resources in parallel worlds. Now, D-wave quantum computing is exactly how I think this universe is put together. James Gates said in an interview with Neil deGrasse Tyson that not only is there computer code embedded in the mathematics that describe the universe, it's a particular type of computer code discovered by Claude Shannon back in the 1940s. And since that debate on stage, Neil deGrasse Tyson has come out publicly and said there's a 50-50 chance we're living in a computer simulation. And then you've got all these other people like Elon Musk says there's 1 billion to 1 that this is base reality. You know, there's something going on here. And one of the things I'm personally suspicious of is that it seems like the technology that's retrieved from these so-called crash flying saucers are barely ahead of where we're at. It's understandable to our scientists, and it's just like a carrot to the next level. And for us to go in 22 years from a chess playing program to D-wave quantum computers, something doesn't make sense in there. Now, I know that we're moving in, as we approach the singularity, we're moving into exponential technological growth. And some people are alive today that remember a point in time where they understood everything that humans knew about electronics. And that's not the case now. And the scary part about that is that an infusion of otherworldly technology could be interjected at this point. And as long as it gave some people something to play with, like a new device on their phone or whatever, they wouldn't think anything of it. Now, there's a alleged insider, Stan Deho, that says in a base that he was at in Australia, there were humanoid extraterrestrials there that his military superiors were aware of and worked with. Like you said before, they're working within certain realms of our military. And he said his superiors, Stan Deho, reports that his superiors were a little frightened that the technology they were dealing with was way ahead of anything that a human being could understand. So there may be an element of infusion of otherworldly technology going on that we're just not going to be able to perceive because, I mean, I wouldn't be able to retro-engineer a television set. You know, if we go into an apocalypse, there's going to be a whole lot of stone chipping if I'm in charge because I don't know how to put together a television. So some fantastic technology comes down the pike, like virtual reality or teleportation, people would just shrug their shoulders now and say, "Wow, it's really advancing really quick." You know, well, I mean, we're used to it. We're used to this rapid advancement.
Well,
there's another.
You just hit a major point here, Russ. Okay, like Roswell, the retrieval of the so-called weather balloon or spacecraft, whatever you want to believe in. But there's been so many other reported, retrievals of UFOs around the world in which America was really good at getting them. And then you hear about reverse engineering. Well, I'm going to be honest with you. In the 60s, we didn't have the capability to reverse engineer a UFO. It was no way. It's just like if you take your computer, right, and go back to 1900 and you go to a fix-it shop, okay, or to any leading scientists on Earth at that time and say, "Here, duplicate this." They couldn't do it. It'd be totally impossible.
Sometimes it takes years. There's an obscure alleged crash in 1941 called the Cape Girardeau incident, and they think they got an atomic motor from that. And the materials allegedly were taken to Purdue University in Indiana, and it took them 7 years before the first wire was touched to germanium crystal, where transistors were invented. So sometimes these materials are taken and given to the top minds at these universities, and they play with it for years before they figure out what to do with it. But there is definitely an exponential growth now. Even in the D-wave quantum computers, the number of qubits, which is placing subatomic particles in superposition, which is very similar to how somebody could be living their life on Earth and have an etheric double in another realm uncoupled from local space-time. They are in superposition with this version of themselves that exhibit a higher potentiality within the cosmic supermind, than the physical life that they're living now. And people like David Chalmers, came up with the matrix hypothesis, where our physical lives are giving an information feed to this higher self or this other aspect of ourself. And that actually correlates with Dr. Nick Bostrom's simulation hypothesis, because he says from the distant future that we are running ancestor simulations right now. And that strangely correlates with the law of one, or the raw material, because in 1981, Carla Ruckert stated that in what we would call the distant future, our sixth density higher self is projecting itself here in a physical body, trying to get into the next level itself, So our lessons that we're learning here are actually helping our higher self enter into seventh density, or the portal of the cosmic supermind. So we might actually be in superposition, just like these qubits on a quantum computer chip. And they're making calculations on these subatomic particles being in two states at the same time, by location. So that makes sense, as below, so above. And you can extend that into the entire multiverse, that if there is this eternal, infinite probability field that is informational based, and all of these physical universes kind of bubble in and out, or pixelated into material reality in pixelated Planck time units, that makes sense, that our whole existence is a giant quantum computer placing particles in superposition. So, the technological aspect of it, I don't know if you're familiar with William Tompkins and his book, Selected by Extraterrestrials. He has a fantastic tale to tell about Nordic secretaries, where he could be near them and all of a sudden he would get these ideas and formulas in his head that would always work out right. And he made very significant contributions with Robert M. Wood. I think they worked for Grumman or some aerospace company together. So there's a lot of people that are coming forward with various types of strange testimony, and you just kind of have to listen to it all and file it and maybe connect the dots when you can.
Well,
but what you were talking about before was the Greada Treaty, right?
Yeah, I am, but you're not giving me a chance to really ask you questions here. And, okay. I don't mean to be rude to you, but I do want to ask you questions off and on. Now, I have a talk show host who comes on every other Sunday. He was with the DOD for, I think, 13 or 14 years, working intelligence and all that stuff. He claims that we're living in a matrix, and that everything, like you were talking about, is a computer simulation. Now, the other thing he swears, that the Earth does not spin. It doesn't rotate. Now, the funny thing is, he has called NASA off and on for the last couple years, because he also produced a couple movies and directed a couple movies out of Hollywood. One was Hollywood and Vine. This is a little plug for him. Now, he called up NASA here again a few days ago and said, hey, I need some footage of the Earth spinning for a documentary I'm making. And he talked to the head person in the that supplies all the news media and all that stuff, film clips, photos, and stuff like that. He recorded it, and she said, we have no pictures of the Earth rotating. None. And then he asked her, well, how about from the space station? How about from when the astronauts went up and got pictures and video and all that stuff and film? And she came back and says, we don't have anything. Now, he did this thing about a year ago, and then he did it a couple years ago. And various people at NASA told him, we don't have this information. We don't have any. We got simulated, videos of the Earth rotating, but we have no footage of it. Now, what do you think about that?
Well, it's just in the realm of the unknowable, because I am aware of the whole flat Earth theories that people think we're living under a glass dome.
Well, I don't buy that. I don't buy that one.
But that's the first time I heard about the Earth not spinning. I'll have to look into that.
Oh yeah, Ron Farham. You can go on to YouTube, and it was the head lady at NASA. It supplies to all the news medias, and she's he